A janitor's cart sits alone in a marble corporate lobby at night. The wheels still, the mop bucket beside it catching the reflection of the ceiling lights on its dark water. Somewhere on the 40th floor, a single office window is still lit. Everywhere else, the building is empty, and the only sound is the slow squeak of rubber soles moving across a floor that has just been cleaned for the third time that day. This is a man nobody in this building has ever asked a single personal question. For 2 months, he has emptied their trash cans, wiped down their break room counters, and mopped up their spilled coffee, and not one of them has learned his last name. In 9 days, that is going to change. In 9 days, every person who has ignored him, mocked him, or wiped their shoes across a floor he just cleaned without so much as a glance in his direction is going to find out exactly who he is. And by then, it will be far too late to take any of it back. Clipped to his worn gray uniform is a small plastic name badge that reads M. Whitfield, Facilities. It is the only thing in this building that tells the truth about him, and even that truth is incomplete. Down the hall, the elevator doors slide open, and a woman in a sharp black blazer steps out, phone pressed to her ear, heels clicking against marble she does not once look down at. Her name is Vanessa Cole, and for 2 months she has treated this man like a piece of furniture that occasionally needs correcting. She once made him mop the same spill twice in one night because she decided, without looking closely the first time, that he had missed a spot. Behind his back, she calls him the mop guy. She has no idea that the man she says that about holds the deed to the very building she is standing in. On the 40th floor, in a boardroom no one is currently using, a single manila folder sits at the head of a long table, a corporate seal pressed into its cover. An all-staff meeting has just been scheduled for Friday morning, and almost no one in this building yet understands what it means. Vanessa certainly doesn't. She believes Friday is the day she finally gets the title she has spent 8 years chasing. She has no idea that the janitor she mocks in the break room is the man who is about to decide whether she keeps anything at all. Back on the ground floor, Marcus Whitfield finishes wringing out his mop and stands alone in the dim light, his reflection doubled in the wet floor beneath him. This is the true story of what happens when the person you decide is beneath you turns out to be the only person who was ever really watching. Stay until the end, because what this man does with his power in the final minutes of this story is not what anyone in that building expects, and it may not be what you expect either. Harrow Industrial Group has been standing in downtown Chicago for almost 60 years, a place that still makes things in an era when most companies like it have long since packed up and shipped the real work overseas. Steel components, packaging systems, industrial hardware that ends up in warehouses and factories across the entire Midwest. It is the kind of company a man could spend 30 years at and retire from with something to show for it. And for a long time, that was exactly the reputation it had. Harrow survived not because of clever spreadsheets, but because of the people who showed up every day and did the work without complaint. Plenty of the men and women on the warehouse floor grew up in families who worked places just like it, fathers and uncles who spent their whole careers standing at the same machine, trusting that loyalty would eventually be repaid in kind. That trust has been tested plenty of times over the decades, through recessions and layoffs and ownership changes that never seemed to ask what the people on the ground actually needed. 6 weeks ago, the company was quietly sold to an outside buyer nobody had met, and ever since, rumors have moved through the office like static electricity nobody can quite shake off. Some say the new owner is a hedge fund looking to strip the company for parts. Others swear it's a foreign conglomerate planning to move everything out of state within a year. Nobody has gotten close enough to the truth to know they're both wrong. Vanessa Cole has spent 8 years climbing the ladder at Harrow, and by almost any measure, she earned it. She understands logistics better than anyone on her floor. She can read a supply chain problem the way other people read a headline, and when she is right, which is often, she is very hard to argue with. But somewhere along the way, her ambition curdled into something colder. She is up for the chief operating officer position now, the last rung before the executive suite, and she has quietly decided that nothing and no one is going to get in her way, including basic decency toward the people she has come to see as beneath her. She wasn't always this way, or at least that's what she tells herself late at night when the guilt manages to slip past her defenses. She grew up watching her own mother get passed over for promotions again and again by men half as capable, and she promised herself she would never be the person left standing outside a locked door. Somewhere in the years since, that promise curdled into something else, a belief that softness was the very thing that had held her mother back, and that the only way to survive in a room full of powerful people was to become someone even they were a little afraid of. It's not an excuse. It's just the quiet architecture underneath a woman most people in this story are about to have very strong feelings about. Marcus Whitfield started as a night janitor at Harrow 2 months ago, telling anyone who asked that he was a laid-off factory worker taking whatever job he could find. It is a believable story and not entirely a lie, though it is far from the whole truth. He arrives early, before almost anyone else, and he watches. He watches how the executives on the top floor treat the cleaning staff, the security guards at the front desk, the interns who are too nervous to ask for help. This is his method, and it has been his method for every company he has ever acquired. He does not trust a balance sheet to tell him whether a business is worth saving. He trusts what people do the moment they believe no one important is watching them. Marcus built his fortune slowly, over 3 decades, after leaving Gary, Indiana with nothing but a duffel bag and a stubborn refusal to believe his life had already been decided for him. He worked his way through logistics and manufacturing long before he ever bought a single company, learning the business from the floor up, which is exactly why he has never trusted an acquisition report written by someone who's never once set foot on a loading dock. Every company his firm has purchased over the last 15 years has gone through the same 60-day process, and more than a few of them have been sold off in pieces once Marcus discovered exactly what kind of place they really were underneath the leadership team's rehearsed presentations. Harrow is different, he suspects, and he intends to find out exactly how different before he ever sits behind a desk with his own name on it. The first small cruelty happens on a Tuesday. Vanessa spills coffee near the elevator bank, rushing to a call, and when she notices Marcus already kneeling to clean it, she snaps at him to do it properly this time, as though he had done sloppy work before. He hadn't. He says nothing, just nods and gets to work. A few minutes later, Denise Okafor, one of the executive assistants on the 14th floor, passes by and quietly apologizes to him on Vanessa's behalf. The way people do when they've decided someone else's rudeness isn't going to be the last word spoken to a person that day. It is a small moment, but it plants something important. Denise is the kind of person who notices Marcus exists. If you're the kind of person who's watched a coworker like Vanessa climb past people who deserved it more, you already know exactly how this feels, and it's worth sticking around, because Marcus is not the only one keeping notes. Tyler Cole works 2 doors down from Vanessa and wants the COO title just as badly as she does, though he is smart enough to hide his ambition behind a friendlier face. Roger Hall, the outgoing CEO, has grown unusually quiet since the sale went through. He met the new owner once, briefly, in a meeting no one else was invited to, and he came out of that room looking like a man who had seen something he wasn't ready to explain. When employees ask him about it, he changes the subject. Over the following weeks, the pattern with Marcus deepens. Vanessa makes him re-clean a conference room minutes before a client meeting because of a wrinkle in the carpet only she seems to see. She mocks his age in front of 2 junior analysts, joking that he probably peaked in high school while she's still climbing. She never raises her voice. She doesn't have to. Contempt, delivered quietly and consistently, does more damage than a single outburst ever could, and Marcus absorbs every bit of it without flinching, because flinching was never part of the plan. Each night, before he leaves the building, Marcus sits in a folding chair in the supply closet and writes in a small leather notebook. Names, dates, small, specific moments. He is not building a case for revenge. He is building the only kind of due diligence that has ever actually told him the truth about a company. Because financial statements can be dressed up, but nobody dresses up the way they treat a janitor at 11 o'clock at night, when they think the only witness is a man who empties trash cans for a living. Friday's meeting is 5 days away now, and the notebook is almost full. As the COO decision creeps closer, Vanessa's desperation starts to show in smaller, sharper ways. A junior employee named Priya spends weeks building a cost-saving proposal for the shipping division, and in the final committee meeting before the board, Vanessa presents it as her own idea, barely mentioning Priya's name in passing. Nobody challenges her. Nobody ever has. Priya doesn't say anything in the meeting. She sits near the back of the room, watching her own idea get presented back to the company with someone else's name attached to it, and does the math on what that silence is costing her, the way people without power usually have to. Later that week, she mentions it quietly to a coworker in the elevator, careful to keep her voice low, and the coworker just shrugs and tells her that's how it's always worked at Harrow, that the people who get credit and the people who do the work have never been the same people in this building. Priya doesn't bring it up again, but she remembers it, the way people always remember exactly who took something from them, even when they never say another word about it out loud. The clearest turning point comes at a company town hall meant to impress a group of visiting executives from a partner firm. With cameras in the room and people watching, Vanessa decides this is the moment to prove she runs a tight ship, and she chooses Marcus as her example. She orders him, in front of 30 employees, to go retrieve her dry cleaning from 3 blocks away, then turns back to the room and criticizes his work loudly enough for everyone to hear, calling him careless, calling him a liability, painting herself as the kind of leader who holds everyone accountable. Marcus says nothing. He simply nods, sets down what he's holding, and walks out to get her dry cleaning. And if you've ever had to swallow something like that just to keep a paycheck coming, you already know there's nothing simple about that kind of silence. The visiting executives laugh along politely, the way people do when they're not sure if something is actually funny or just uncomfortable, and Vanessa mistakes their laughter for approval. Nobody in that room, including Vanessa, has any idea that the man walking out to fetch her dry cleaning has more authority in that building than every single person sitting at that table combined. Denise can't let it go. She finds Vanessa alone later that afternoon and tells her, carefully but directly, that what happened in that meeting wasn't leadership. It was cruelty dressed up as a performance for people who don't matter half as much as the man she just humiliated. Vanessa doesn't even look up from her monitor. She tells Denise to worry about her own career and let the adults handle theirs. It's the kind of line that sounds sharp in the moment and sounds a great deal worse in hindsight. A few days later, Marcus almost breaks his own cover. Vanessa is on a call, working through a shipping delay out loud to no one in particular, getting the timeline wrong in a way that will cost the company real money if it goes uncorrected. Marcus, wiping down a nearby table, corrects her without thinking, laying out the actual bottleneck in the supply chain with a precision that has nothing to do with mopping floors. For one full second, Vanessa actually looks at him, really looks, the way you look at someone when a detail doesn't add up. Then she laughs it off as a lucky guess from the mop guy and goes back to her call, never once wondering how a janitor would know that. Roger tries one more time to warn her, choosing his words like a man walking across ice. He tells her the new owner has, in his words, unconventional methods, and that she might want to think carefully about how she's treated people this past month. Vanessa smiles and tells him her numbers speak for themselves, and that whoever this new owner turns out to be, results are results. Roger doesn't argue with her. He just looks tired in a way that has nothing to do with the hour. Roger has his own reasons for staying quiet, reasons that have nothing to do with cowardice and everything to do with a promise. When he met Marcus that first afternoon, before any of this began, Marcus asked him a single question that Roger still thinks about most nights: whether he believed the people running Harrow's floors would treat him the same way if he showed up tomorrow wearing a janitor's uniform instead of a suit. Roger didn't have a good answer then, and he still doesn't have one now, which is exactly why he's kept his mouth shut and let the next 30 days unfold exactly the way Marcus asked him to. That night, Marcus closes his notebook for the final time. It is full of names, full of small cruelties and small kindnesses, a 2-month record of exactly who this company has become underneath its polished lobby and its glass elevators. He isn't just deciding who gets the COO title anymore. He's deciding whether Harrow Industrial Group is still the kind of place his own father would have recognized, a place built on the same values that got Marcus through 30-hour shifts on an assembly line in Gary, Indiana, back when nobody in a suit ever bothered to learn his father's name either, or whether it has quietly rotted from the inside the way so many companies do once enough people start believing that power means never having to be kind. On Thursday, still in his gray uniform, Marcus personally walks every floor of the building, handing out a printed memo announcing Friday's mandatory all-staff meeting. He hands one directly to Vanessa. She takes it without looking up, without a single flicker of recognition passing between them, and drops it on her desk next to a stack of files she considers far more important. She has no idea. She just took the most important piece of paper of her career from the hand of the man who's about to hand her either the biggest promotion or the hardest lesson of her life. Friday morning arrives heavy with rumor. Layoffs, restructuring, a possible relocation out of state. Every theory moves through the building except the correct one. Vanessa spends the morning rehearsing a version of an acceptance speech in her head, already picturing herself standing where Roger usually stands. For the first time in 2 months, Marcus is nowhere on the floor, and a few people notice, though none of them think much of it. Why would they? He's just the janitor. By 9 o'clock, the atrium is full, every department gathered under the glass ceiling that usually only executives get to walk beneath. Roger steps up to the small podium set up near the reception desk, visibly nervous in a way the entire room can see, and announces that the new owner of Harrow Industrial Group is going to address the company directly for the first time since the sale went through. Phones lower. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Vanessa sits in the front row, spine straight, already composing the introduction she plans to give this mysterious new owner the moment she gets the chance. If you've ever waited for a moment like this, for the truth about someone to finally catch up with them, this is the part you'll want to watch closely, because it's about to happen exactly the way you'd hope it would, and exactly the way you never could have predicted. Marcus Whitfield walks out from the side hallway, not in his gray uniform, but in a dark tailored suit, calm, unhurried, the same face the entire building has walked past for 2 months without ever really seeing. The recognition moves through the crowd like a current. Denise's hand rises slowly to her mouth. Tyler goes pale and takes half a step backward, as though putting distance between himself and whatever is about to happen. And Vanessa's confident, rehearsed expression collapses in real time. 2 months of memory rearranging themselves behind her eyes all at once. Every spilled coffee, every dry cleaning errand, every quiet joke about a man who apparently peaked in high school. Marcus doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He tells the room, calmly, that he spent 60 days on this floor not to trick anyone, but because a balance sheet has never once told him the truth about a company. Numbers can be dressed up. People, when they think no one important is watching, cannot. He tells them, plainly, that he grew up watching his own father get treated as though he were invisible on a factory floor not so different from this one, and that he made a promise a long time ago that if he ever had the power to change that, he would use it. Then, without raising his voice and without naming a single name, he describes an executive who made him re-clean a room minutes before a meeting over nothing, who joked about his age in front of colleagues, who sent him out for dry cleaning like a servant in front of visiting clients just to look tough for an audience. He doesn't have to say her name. Every head in that atrium turns, slowly and almost involuntarily, toward the front row, and the color drains out of Vanessa Cole's face in front of 300 of her coworkers. Her hands tighten around the folder in her lap, knuckles going pale, and for the first time in 8 years at this company, she has absolutely nothing to say. The silence stretches long enough that it becomes its own kind of sound, 300 people breathing in a room where nobody dares to be the first to move. He does not fire her on the spot. That would be easy, and Marcus has never been interested in easy. Instead, he announces that every leadership position at Harrow, including the COO seat everyone assumed was already decided, will be reevaluated over the next 30 days based not only on performance, but on how each candidate treats every single person in this building, from the boardroom down to the loading dock. The meeting ends in a silence so complete you can hear the elevator chime 2 floors up. Nobody claps. Nobody quite knows what to do with their hands. The days that follow are quiet in a way Vanessa has never experienced at Harrow. Colleagues who used to laugh along with her jokes about the mop guy now find reasons not to make eye contact in the hallway. Tyler distances himself almost immediately, recasting himself in front of Marcus as the humble, people-first alternative for the COO role, a man who's suddenly very interested in learning the names of the security staff. Marcus requests a private meeting with Vanessa, and when she walks in expecting to be fired, he surprises her by offering something else entirely. Total honesty, delivered without cruelty, about who she has become. He tells her she has real talent, real instincts, the kind of operational mind that companies genuinely need. But somewhere along the way, he tells her, she confused cruelty for strength and confidence for a license to treat other human beings like they were invisible, and those two things are not the same, no matter how long she's been telling herself otherwise. He gives her 30 days, the same window every leader in the building has just been given, to prove something not through words, but through consistent, observed behavior. He isn't interested in punishing her for who she was 2 months ago, he tells her. He's only interested in who she chooses to become now that she knows she's being watched, and more importantly, who she becomes on the days she starts to believe she isn't. Vanessa doesn't argue. For the first time in years, she doesn't have a sharp comeback ready. She sits across from the man she once called the mop guy and feels something she hasn't let herself feel in a long time, which is the particular discomfort of being seen clearly by someone who isn't interested in punishing her for it. She leaves that meeting quieter than she's been in a decade, and for the first time since she started at Harrow, she goes home that night and doesn't open her laptop once. If this is the kind of story that reminds you people can still be held to something better, this channel exists for exactly that reason, and there's more waiting for you if you decide to stick around. Over the following month, small things start to shift. Vanessa learns the name of the security guard she's walked past twice a day for 3 years and starts actually using it. She finds Denise in the break room and apologizes, without being asked to, for the way she dismissed her that afternoon. She overhears a colleague mocking a temp worker for a mistake and, instead of laughing along the way she once would have, quietly shuts it down, telling him plainly that the temp worker in question has been at Harrow longer than he has and deserves better than being someone's punchline in the break room. Denise notices the change before anyone else does, mostly because she's the one who has the most reason to be skeptical of it. She watches Vanessa carefully for the first 2 weeks, half expecting the old version of her to resurface the moment the pressure eases, and it never quite does. One afternoon, Vanessa stops by Denise's desk with 2 coffees instead of 1, and doesn't say much beyond thank you for saying something back when nobody else would have. It isn't a grand gesture. It's barely 30 seconds. But it's the first time in 3 years Denise has felt like Vanessa actually saw her as a person instead of a fixture at the edge of the room. None of it is dramatic. None of it is performed for an audience. That's exactly what makes it real, Because it's easy to fake decency for a single day when you know someone important is watching, and almost impossible to fake it consistently for 30. She also finds Priya, the analyst whose idea she once presented as her own, and does something she's never done before in her career. She corrects the record in front of the same committee, giving Priya full credit publicly, without being asked to, and without anyone forcing her hand. It costs her nothing on paper and everything in pride, which is exactly the kind of cost Marcus has spent 2 months learning to watch for. At the end of the 30 days, Marcus promotes Vanessa to Chief Operating Officer, not despite what happened in that atrium, but because of who he watched her become in the weeks afterward. He tells her plainly that a person's character isn't defined by the moment they get caught. It's defined by what they choose to do next, when getting defensive and walking away would have been so much easier than actually changing. Months later, on a quiet weeknight, Marcus Whitfield walks the same lobby floor he once mopped for a living, now simply as the chairman of a company that finally looks the way he always hoped it could. He passes a young janitor he's never met, a kid barely out of his teens, headphones around his neck, focused on his work and expecting, like Marcus once did, to go entirely unnoticed by anyone important enough to matter. Marcus stops. He asks the young man his name. He shakes his hand. He asks him where he's from, whether he's still in school, what he wants for himself 5 years from now. The kind of question nobody ever bothered to ask his own father on a factory floor in Gary, Indiana, decades before Marcus ever had the power to change anything at all. The young man answers slowly at first, and used to being asked anything by a man in a suit. And then, once he realizes the question is sincere, he keeps talking long after he probably should have gotten back to work, and Marcus lets him. Dignity was never something a person earns through their job title, their salary, or the uniform they happen to be wearing to work that day. Marcus learned that lesson decades before he ever had the money or the power to act on it, standing beside his father on a factory floor in Gary, Indiana, watching grown men look straight through a hard-working human being as though he were part of the machinery. He carried that lesson through every company he's ever built, bought, or walked away from, and he intends to carry it through every company he ever will. The only measure that has ever really mattered is how a person treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for them in return. And if this story reminded you of someone in your own life, the good kind or the other kind, that's exactly the conversation worth starting in the comments below.